A single page of a novel. That is all it takes. Not a death in the family, not a diagnosis, not a phone call that changes everything, just a stranger's sentences arranged in a particular order, and something in you shifts, and you are not entirely sure you are okay. I want to talk about that, because I think it is one of the strangest things a human being does. And I think when you understand why it happens, really understand it, all the way down, you will never think about your own pain the same way again. There is a passage in a novel that has made me extremely uncomfortable and emotional. It goes like this. A woman stands on a railway platform in 19th century Russia. She has lost everything that mattered to her. Her marriage, her reputation, her son. The man she destroyed herself for has grown cold in the particular way that men grow cold, not with cruelty, but with comfort. He has simply moved on. And she is standing on the platform, watching a train approach, and she is thinking, with perfect clarity, about how easy it would be to end it. And then she steps forward. Anna Karenina, Tolstoy, 1878. Readers have described putting the book down after that passage and sitting in silence, hands shaking slightly, breathing requiring attention. People often describe it as the closest they had ever come to understanding what it feels like to be truly alone, despite being in a room full of people they loved. These people have never been to Russia. Most never lost a child. Most had never stood on a platform like that. And Anna Karenina never existed, not once, not for a single second in the history of the universe. There is no platform. There was no train. There is no woman who loved unwisely and paid for it with everything she had. There are only words on paper, ink arranged by a man who died in 1910 into patterns that produce something that functions exactly like grief. So where is the grief coming from? I have been thinking about this question for a long time, and I have not found a clean answer. What I have found is something stranger than a clean answer. I have found that the question points to something deeply wrong with how we understand pain. Not fictional pain specifically, all pain, but we will get there. First, the obvious answer, the one most of you are already reaching for. Empathy. You feel what Anna feels because you imagine yourself into her position. You run a simulation of her experience in your mind. Your brain models her suffering, and in doing so produces a shadow of that suffering in you, a copy, a resonance. This is the standard account, the simple answer. But here's my problem with this answer. When you empathize with a real person, a friend who has lost someone, a stranger whose grief you witness on a street corner, your empathy is a response to something that exists. The suffering has a location. It is happening inside a real nervous system in a real body that occupies real space. You are resonating with an actual signal. When you respond to Anna Karenina, there is no signal to resonate with. The suffering you are empathizing with does not exist anywhere. There is no nervous system generating it. There is no body. There is no actual experience of despair that your empathy is reaching toward. You are resonating with an absence. You are feeling the echo of a sound that was never made. And this is not a small distinction. It is the thing that breaks the empathy explanation open entirely. Because if your pain requires no actual suffering to respond to, if it can be fully produced by a description of suffering that has no referent anywhere in the world, then what exactly is pain? Let's talk about a man named Elliot. He was a soldier, and in the war he lost his arm. Not gradually, not through illness. He was there, and then the arm was not there, and the world had rearranged itself in an instant. And for months after, for years, sometimes Elliot felt pain in the arm that was gone. Phantom limb pain. You have heard of it. It is well documented, well studied, the subject of considerable medical literature. Surgeons still do not fully understand it. But I want you to think about what it actually means. The arm does not exist. The nerve endings that would transmit pain signals from the arm do not exist. There is nothing there that could possibly hurt. And yet the pain is real. Not metaphorically real, not psychologically real in some soft, dismissible sense. Physiologically, neurologically, in every measurable way, the pain is real. It registers as pain. It responds to painkillers as pain. It disrupts sleep as pain. It is pain. Pain generated in response to a body part that is not there. Pain with no location. This is exactly what happens when you read Anna Karenina. Your brain generates grief in response to a person who is not there. Grief with no location. The mechanism is identical. The only difference is what is missing. In Elliot's case, an arm. In yours, a character. Pain does not require a cause in the world. It requires only a cause in the brain. There is a study I keep returning to. Researchers showed people images of hands being stabbed with needles. Just images. Photographs. The hands belonged to no one the subjects knew. The stabbings were not happening to them. And their pain centers lit up. Not their empathy centers. Not their emotional processing regions. Their actual pain architecture. The same neural pathways that process physical pain in their own bodies activated in response to looking at pictures of pain happening to strangers. The brain does not draw a clean line between your pain and observed pain, between real pain and described pain, between the injury and the story of the injury. It processes all of them through the same machinery. The same equipment that feels a broken leg also feels Anna Karenina's despair. And this matters enormously, because it means that every time you consume a tragedy, every time you read about suffering, watch suffering, sit with someone else's suffering, you are not simply observing. You are partially experiencing. Your nervous system is running a version of the program, a lighter version, a copy without the full consequences, but a real copy. Now let's just explore differently, because the phantom limb and the needle study in Anna Karenina are all examples of pain without an external cause. But I want to suggest that they are not exceptions. I want to suggest they are the rule. Like the last time I was anxious to start going to a new place because I was way too afraid to step out of my comfort zone. Or the last time you were anxious about something. Not anxious because something bad was happening, anxious because something bad might happen. The meeting tomorrow. The test results that weren't back yet. The conversation you needed to have that you kept not having. Where was the pain? Nothing had happened. No injury. No loss. No actual bad event in the world. The pain was generated entirely by your brain in response to a story it was telling itself about a future that did not yet exist. A fictional future. Your brain wrote a tragedy and then suffered it. Last night when you lay awake at 3 a.m, what were you suffering? Not the present moment. The present moment at 3 a.m. is almost always fine. It is quiet. The bed exists. You are breathing. You are suffering a narrative, a story about what might happen, what people might think, what you might have done differently, what might be coming. You were feeling pain produced by fiction, your own fiction. There is a hypothetical that philosophers use to test the edges of consciousness. Imagine two people. The first has lived a full life: love, loss, joy, grief, the whole complicated arrangement of a human being moving through time. The second was created 5 minutes ago with a perfect set of false memories implanted so precisely that they believe they have lived the same full life. Every memory feels real. Every grief feels earned. Every love feels genuine. The second person is suffering right now from a breakup that never happened, from a father who never existed, dying 3 years ago. from a failure at work that took place in a reality that was manufactured 5 minutes ago. The question that philosophers ask is there suffering real? And I find this to be interesting because almost everyone says yes. Not because the events happened, but because the pain is happening. Right now. In a nervous system that is genuinely processing it. Genuinely generating the biochemistry of grief and loss and regret. The cause is fictional. The suffering is not. And this is exactly what happens to you every night when your brain writes catastrophes at 3 a.m. Every time you spiral about a conversation that has not happened yet. Every time a novel makes your hands do something strange. The cause does not need to be real. The machinery runs either way. There is a phrase in Japanese mono, no oware, it does not translate cleanly. The closest is something like the pathos of things, a gentle sadness at the impermanence of beautiful things, the feeling you get watching cherry blossoms fall, or watching a film end, or closing a book and sitting with it for a moment before returning to your life. Mono no aware is not grief about something that happened to you. It is grief about the nature of things, about the fact that everything passes, about the specific beauty of things precisely because they do not last. It is pain about an idea, pain about the structure of existence, not about any particular event, not about any particular person, about the shape of time itself. And yet anyone who has felt it will tell you it is one of the most real feelings they have ever had. A culture built an entire aesthetic philosophy around pain that has no specific cause, around the grief of impermanence, around the ache of things being exactly what they are temporary, lovely, already leaving, around pain that lives nowhere except in the capacity to notice. Here is where I have arrived. Most human pain is not what we think it is. We think of pain as a signal, a message from the world to the body saying something has gone wrong here, a warning system, the evolutionary legacy of a species that needed to know when it was being damaged. And sometimes, pain is that. But most of the time, most of the pain that actually shapes human lives is something else entirely. It is the brain generating suffering from information, from descriptions, from memories, from anticipations, from stories, from the observed suffering of strangers, from the imagined suffering of fictional people. We are, in the most literal, neurological sense, animals that can hurt themselves with a story. And we do, constantly, across our entire lives. But here's the thing I want to be careful about, because it would be easy to hear all of this and conclude that fictional pain is lesser pain, manageable pain. Pain you should be able to dismiss because it has no real cause. That would be wrong. The philosopher Colin Radford asked why we cry at fiction if we know it is not real. He spent years on the question. His conclusion was that our responses to fictional suffering are irrational, a bug in the system, an embarrassing glitch. I think he had it exactly backwards. The capacity to feel the pain of things that are not present Anna's despair, tomorrow's disaster, the grief of impermanence is not a malfunction. It is the same capacity that lets you love someone who is not in the room, that lets you feel loyalty to people you have never met. That lets you grieve properly, which is to say for longer than the event itself warrants, which is to say in a way that means the lost thing actually mattered. You cannot have the depth without the ghost pain. You cannot have the love without the 3 a.m. You cannot have the literature without the hands doing something strange. The brain that suffers fictional things is the same brain that imagines futures worth working toward. That models other people's inner lives with enough accuracy to be kind to them. That holds the dead alive in memory long enough for them to have meant something. The ghost pain and the real pain are made of the same stuff, They run on the same machinery. They are not two different things. They are one thing seen from two different angles. Fictional pain is not a malfunction. It is exactly what let your ancestors anticipate danger and survive it. Exactly what lets you love people and mourn them and write novels about women on platforms and feel, reading those novels, something true about what it means to be irreparably human. The pain is real. The cause is a story. Both of these things are true at the same time.